Hi there, and welcome back to a new episode of Surface Interval. We talked about my very first Drysuit dive, and today we're gonna discuss which points you should probably check before getting your first Drysuit. Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any episode of this podcast. And I can't wait to see your comments on this video about your tips for people that are starting their journey with drysuit diving. Let's assume you decided you want to buy your very first drysuit. That's amazing. Go for it. And before you do that, I would suggest you to listen to this podcast to see from my experience what you could probably pay attention to when buying your very first drysuit. I think the very first thing I chose was the color, and even though it doesn't sound important, don't underestimate that. I think completely black dry suits look amazing, let's be honest. But consider one thing, dry suits are meant to keep you warm. So they're gonna keep you warm below the surface, but outside too. And I've heard many of my dive buddies complaining, and I've seen them sweating at the surface when they're wearing their dry suit and it's summer and it's warm outside, but they're gonna make a dive that is gonna be cold afterwards. So they still need the dry suit, but outside is warm. And don't forget that black stores much more warmth from the sun. So if it's a sunny day, you probably don't want to go with a dry suit that is completely black. Another point you should consider for the color is, I know it sounds silly, but pictures. If you're wearing a red dry suit, the color will disappear in the first 5 meters. One thing that many people consider when choosing the color of their dry suit are group pictures. If you have a bright color or a bit of special color, you will spot yourself so much more easily. And of course, consider that despite everybody having a red dry suit, red disappears really fast underwater. So I took a green one. I love it. Very few people have this color. I recognize it immediately. Also, when it's like, for example, hanging among other dry suits, I know exactly where mine is. And I think it also looks pretty cool in pictures. And it's not even completely black, so I don't sweat too much at the surface. Let's move on to the seal neck. Now, there are three options that you can get, at least that I know of. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But the first one is, of course, the latex that's has been like this since forever. And the disadvantage of it is that it tends to choke a bit more. So, especially in the beginning, and if you're not used to a dry suit, it can be really uncomfy, especially outside. And it's a bit more tricky to take out. And if you have long hair like I do, get ready to lose some every time. The alternative to it, and that's pretty new, it's the neoprene neck. So you can have the neck in neoprene. And this is meant to keep you warmer. First of all, it's warmer than latex to have on, and it should choke a bit less. Now, from personal experience, I have a neoprene neck, but I'm not sure if I would do the same in my next suit because I really had a lot of problems in the beginning. Even though it was cut for my neck size, it kept leaking. Even if just a tiny bit, trust me, it gets cold after a while. And I brought it to make it tighter, and then the problem was my head wasn't fitting in there anymore. And then I cut it again, and found a middle way. Now it works more or less, but it still leaks, especially when I do skills or need to turn my head too much. So it is warmer, and I heard of people being really happy with it. For me, it didn't really work out. So maybe read a bit more reviews if you want to go for a neoprene neck. And then there is the third option. It's sort of a middle way if you want. It's in silicone. Now, silicone will choke you a bit less than latex, but it's much more delicate. And Even though I don't really have nails, it can get damaged really fast by taking it out. So you really need to pay attention if you have a silicone neck that you don't damage it while wearing it or taking it out. And of course, it's silicone, so it's not going to isolate as much as neoprene. So it chokes a bit less, but also isolates a bit less. These are the three options. And what I suggest you for the wrist is absolutely latex. Now, if you're new to dry suit diving, you will feel like it's too tight. It shouldn't be too tight, but a bit, yes. So it will be a bit tighter the first times you wear, and then it will get less and less tight with using it. And now there's one more thing I would like to discuss, and it's the material. You can get dry suits fully in neoprene, or you can get a trilaminate. I myself chose the trilaminate system because in general it's much lighter, and I feel like it's much less baggy and it allows me to move much more freely. Neoprenes work as well, exactly as good as trilaminate, but for example are much more heavy. So if you wanna go for a trip, you have to consider it's gonna occupy much more space and it's gonna weight much more than a trilaminate suit. Now, when you get a dry suit, don't forget that you also need to choose something to put below, because even though you're gonna think a dry suit keeps you warm, the dry suit doesn't keep you warm. The gauze layer, yes, but the suit itself is really thin and it's not gonna isolate you. So you're gonna need to wear an undervest, an undersuit, and depending on the conditions you're diving in, of course, wear something that keeps you warm. A bit like if you're going skiing, you're not gonna go just with a thin layer of a wind jacket. You're gonna wear a pullover below, and this is the same thing you should think about when you go dry suit diving. Since I made my experience in cold water, I have really cool undervests and undersuits, and I can really suggest you the best of the best if you need. But I think for the moment we're gonna stop here because it's just about the dry suit and not about the undergarment as well. But if you have question about, feel free to write them in the comments or drop me a DM on Instagram. I'm really happy to answer everything. As I said in the beginning of the video, if you are already a dry suit diver, write in the comments below for the people that are starting off what your tips are, not just on which kind of suit to get or which material to choose, but also about your experience and any tips that could make it easier for them to start this journey. I wish you a wonderful weekend. Hope you get to dive a bit and can't wait to talk to you next week.